This is 8 Minutes, a podcast helping you understand the energy and climate challenge in just a few minutes. I'm your host, Paul Schuster. Heat pumps are having a moment. According to the International Energy Agency, heat pump sales grew by 11% globally last year. And here in the US, heat pump sales officially outpaced gas furnace sales for the first time. Boosted by incentives tucked away in the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as state and local rebates, heat pumps are both climate-friendly and wallet-friendly. But the process to get heat pumps installed, between sizing them correctly, to getting a knowledgeable HVAC installer, to accessing those rebates, there are a lot of moving parts. Too bad we don't have a magic concierge who, with a snap of our fingers, can do a lot of that heavy lifting for us. Or wait, maybe we do. Elephant Energy is a Colorado-based company making it easy for homeowners to install heat pumps. Full disclosure, Elephant just opened up operations in Massachusetts, and my wife and I were among the first installations that they did out here. And honestly, I was so impressed that I needed to invite Dr. Richardson and Jan Keleher onto the podcast to talk about their service and the challenges that they are trying to overcome for the heat pump market. 8 minutes. It's how long it takes the sun's rays to hit Earth, or about the amount of time my kids spent doing their homework last night. 2 hours fighting with me for 8 minutes of effort. Whatever. Let's get it on. Dr. Richardson and Jan Keleher, welcome to the 8 Minutes podcast.
Great to be here.
It's great to be here.
I'm excited about this. As I kind of talked about in the intro, I have wanted to install heat pumps into my own house for forever. Always a little bit overcome by all the challenges and the effort that would be needed to get them installed in the first place. And Dr. and I have had conversations in the past. I was very excited when you moved into the Massachusetts area and were able to help us put those machines and that equipment to work. So thank you from a personal perspective. And I'm really excited to share that experience and that story with our audience, both because I think it's a story worth telling, but also because of the type of service that you're providing highlights some of the challenges that we still need to overcome in the heat pump. So with that, Dr., maybe we can start with you. Just a quick introduction as to who you are and Elephant, and then Jan, maybe similar introduction on your side as well.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Well, look, really appreciate your support of Elephant Energy thus far. It's been great having you as a customer, and really excited to be here. So my background really quickly is that I've been in climate tech since about 2010. I was working in strategy consulting, helping some large telcos make a little bit more money, and just, wasn't motivated by the fact that my career was not contributing to some larger cause. So I left consulting, ended up joining a private equity startup, which you don't often hear those two words together, but joined that firm called Vision Ridge Partners back in 2010. Spent about a decade with the founder, Ruben Munger, building a private equity infrastructure investor where we built one of the larger pools of capital to go be investing in and supporting entrepreneurs and asset developers to be building the future of the energy space. So we invested in all sorts of asset-based companies, things like EVgo, and currently have some investments in electric school buses and electric ferries, all the things that we need to do to transition the economy to be much more climate friendly. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I decided I was feeling the entrepreneurial itch. I wanted to be
being part of a startup PE firm wasn't enough for you. You had to go out and actually be at the startup itself, huh?
That's exactly right. That's right. The private equity thing felt a little too cushy. I wanted to add some risk and some fear into my own life. So I decided to start a company. And we started Elephant Energy. I started it about 3 years ago with a good friend of mine from the strategy consulting days. He'd also been spending his career in climate tech as an operator. And we decided to get together to try to advance the energy transition through making climate solutions for residential homeowners more accessible and affordable.
And then, Jan, you are the project manager in charge of the Massachusetts market. So I was hoping you might be able to introduce yourself as well. This is the first time, just so everybody knows, This is the first time that I've actually done a dual interview on 8 minutes. So I'm hoping this works out well, but I really thought DR giving the perspective around Elephant and the story that you have around the business, and Jan kind of more boots on the ground and some of the challenges around what actually has to occur at the home and the residential side. But then again, Jan, I'm getting ahead of myself. I was hoping you might be able to introduce yourself.
Yeah, no, thanks, Paul. Happy to do it. Yeah, my background is really started with engineering. I was graduated from engineering school in 2015, and then quickly realized I didn't want to do just engineering. So I spent 4.5 years working for a utility, Eversource, here in Massachusetts, with large commercial clients on energy efficiency projects. So learned a ton about project development, energy efficiency work, the policies involved, and in particular, just the inner workings of regulated utilities, which come with unique motivations. And then following that, spent 3.5 years working for the city and county of Denver. So there I was really focused on electrification policy and electrification programs. Denver was uniquely positioned to become a leader in the public space on electrification and took that opportunity. But even still, I think saw some more need in the private market. And that's sort of when I think DR and I connected. And it just happened to work out that at the time I was planning a move to New England, he was opening up the Massachusetts market. And I stepped in and yeah, I've been running with that ever since.
Welcome both of you to the podcast. DR, as we were prepping for this, I thought you had a really interesting story as to how Elephant came about and kind of the background and why you ended up focusing on home heating in the first place. And I think that segues nicely into the type of service that Elephant provides. Maybe you can give our audience a little bit of an overview as to what Elephant does.
Sure, happy to, Paul. And actually, before we go there, I have a couple of questions for you.
Uh-oh.
Sounds like you wanted heat pumps before Elephant Energy launched in Massachusetts. When you asked your contractor, what did they say to you?
For us, we had our air conditioning unit blow on us last summer. The condenser just absolutely decided to stop working. And we had to suffer through August without any sort of air conditioning in the house, which I was fine with because I knew I was saving money, but my wife was not necessarily very comfortable. The bigger challenge was that when we went to our HVAC contractor, I sat there and said, "Wow, this would be a great opportunity for us to transition to heat pumps." Because if I'm going to be putting in a new AC unit, I may as well just put in a new heat pump and just handle the whole thing. But the challenge for us, at least, was that we could get the AC unit installed within 3 days. It was going to be a little bit less expensive. They were really pushing for some quick comfort related activity there. And it was going to take them longer to source the heat pumps. It was going to take them longer to install. And I just didn't feel very comfortable with the energy, if you will, that was being put into trying to convince me to stay with the traditional AC and gas fired furnace that I had upstairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we waited and then DR, I saw that Elephant was moving into Massachusetts. I'd been sort of looking for that magic concierge, if you will, to help us navigate through the process because I knew that there were rebates through Mass Save and there were incentives from the IRA and there were different financing packages and financing options related to installing heat pumps that I even though I've been in this business for so long, I'm not as informed on the details of those types of activities. So this came at a very opportune time where we were able to get everything done this summer, and it worked out fantastically.
That's great. That's helpful, Paul. And it's interesting, right? Because that's the exact same process that I went through at my home here in Colorado, where I had a 17-year-old gas furnace that I knew was on its last legs, and I wanted to electrify it. We had started Elephant Energy earlier in the year in 2021. We had our initial thesis to help homeowners make their homes more climate friendly was to sell them a renewable energy product, much like Arcadia or another electricity retailer that would decarbonize their electricity. And instead, what we got was a lot of feedback and a lot of questions around, that's an interesting upgrade for my home, and to make my home more climate friendly. But what about a heat? I kind of want a heat pump, or I want a heat pump water heater, and I'm having a hard time figuring that out. And so, as Josh, my business partner, and I were thinking about it, we said, well, we have a test case. Let's deploy a heat pump at my house. It can't be that hard for two effectively unemployed people trying to get a business off the ground. And what we found is just every single thing that you just talked about was difficult. It's hard to find a contractor. We reached out to about 15 HVAC contractors here in the Colorado market, and we're not able to find a single one that would install a heat pump. They all said it needed gas backup, and everybody said they do not work. Well, we know they work from the experience in Europe, where about 75+% of homes in a lot of the northern Scandinavian countries have heat pumps as their primary heating source. So we knew the technology worked. Most of the HVAC companies did not have electricians, so we'd have to go find our own electrician. Nobody knew anything about rebates. There are rebates at the city level, at the county level, at the utility level. There are tax credits both federally and statewide. Nobody knew anything about those or how to access them. What size heat pump would we need? The contractors did exactly zero work to understand how much heating load my home actually needed, and instead relied on old school rules of thumb that were not particularly accurate, and in our view, were going to massively oversize things. Nobody had any strong recommendations on technology other than their preferred brand. You ask them about a different brand. Oh, no, we can't possibly sell you that. It doesn't work, but this other brand that we know does work. And there's also, just as a homeowner, right, very little confidence. It gets cold in Colorado. It gets cold in Massachusetts, right? We just had a cold snap of -10 degrees. It got to -13 in 2022. It gets really cold. We need to make sure that this technology is going to work, and not a single one of these contractors was giving me the confidence that they knew what they were doing to actually ensure that it was going to work on the coldest days, the hottest days, and work, going to be optimized for our utility bills. So Josh and I decided that's a pretty good set of problems. Let's go install a heat pump ourselves and figure it out. So we installed a heat pump. We tried to work through every single one of these problems, and in the process of going through that was our aha moment of, this is so difficult and so complicated, and it shouldn't be. It should be really easy. You should be able to wave a magic wand, press a button, and have everything done for you automatically, because it's not hard. None of these are rocket science, Paul, right? They're all easy, solvable problems. You just have to know what you're doing. And so we felt like we could figure out what we're doing. We're able to install a heat pump in my house that's worked beautifully through 2 cold snaps of below 0 degrees Fahrenheit here in Colorado. And we've been able to build a pretty big business here in Colorado and in Massachusetts, based on being an expert around and being that one-stop shop for climate-friendly home upgrades, including heat pumps and heat pump water heaters.
Let's back up 2 steps. All right. Heat pumps are an important technology for climate change. As I mentioned in the intro, they're having a moment. They're so critical to shifting, especially residential home heating, away from natural gas, away from oil, and onto an electric grid, which can then use renewable energy or some form of cleaner fuel. DR, tell me a little bit about heat pumps, what they're doing. You mentioned some of the challenges around cold climate that used to exist, and I'm going to prep you a little bit here and lead the conversation. Because, as you said, Scandinavia, Colorado, Massachusetts, Maine right now is having an enormous moment for heat pumps. Would love to know how heat pumps have evolved, from that old stage heat pump that maybe people are maybe familiar with, versus what's on the market today, and how that technology has improved. I'm leaving you with a whole bunch of questions, but I'd love to get your perspective as to the basics around the heat pump market and what's occurring out there.
Sure. So heat pump technology is a super old technology. Your air conditioner is a heat pump. Your refrigerator is a heat pump. What they do is they don't actually create heating or cooling. Instead, they're adding or subtracting heat. They're moving it from one area to another area. So an air conditioner, what it's doing is not actually creating cooling. Instead, it's absorbing heat from your house and then removing that heat and bringing it outside through refrigerant. And the heat pump on your fridge is doing the exact same thing. It's not actually creating cooling in your fridge. It's actually just removing heat and dumping that out behind or below your fridge. So it's very old technology. The new, quote unquote, the new innovation has been its ability to work in reverse. So not just provide cooling, but provide heating and do that at very cold temperatures. So what do I mean by this? Well, on a really hot day, let's say it's 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and you want your house to be nice and cool at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a 40-degree Fahrenheit temperature delta. It's basically your air conditioner is trying to bring indoor air out, or indoor heat, and bring it out and change that temperature by about 40 degrees. That's what we call the delta T in the industry. The challenge is it gets down to -10 in Colorado or Massachusetts. So
we don't see 110 degrees very often in Massachusetts, right. But we see the opposite. Yes.
Right. And so the technology, right, when it's -10 out and you're trying to get heating up to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, that's now an 80-degree temperature swing, which is a lot larger than the 40-degree temperature swing we saw on the cooling side of things. So for heating, that technology has to work a whole lot harder, and it has to be more efficient and a lot more effective to actually be able to heat a home up to 70 degrees Fahrenheit when it's -10. So that's relatively new using the old technology. But the manufacturers have had to get a whole lot better at ensuring cold weather performance, and that's been harder up until recently. So now recently we have the technology. It's become a lot more efficient. It works in reverse to provide both heating and cooling sort of year round for cold climates. And it's a really important technology from a decarbonization standpoint. So that's the last thing about why it's having a moment. You can never really decarbonize a gas furnace, right? We're always burning methane in a home. That methane is always going to be creating CO2 emissions. That's hard to decarbonize. That ends up being 20+% of a residential home's carbon footprint. And instead, what we can do is we can replace that gas heating and cooling or heating with electric technology, and you can decarbonize electricity. You can replace those electrons with wind, solar, other renewable energy technologies. And so while today you're replacing something that burned natural gas with something that is being powered via electricity, that electricity comes from a number of different sources. It could come from coal plants. It could come from gas plants. It can also come from wind and solar. And so as we deploy more wind and solar projects across the country, that electricity is becoming decarbonized over time. In the markets that we're in today, the renewable energy mix is high enough such that the heat pump today is reducing the carbon emissions total from a home. And over time, it's going to get even better. So why are heat pumps having a moment? Well, it comes down to the fact that the technology now works well at really cold climates here in the US. And because it's such an important lever in decarbonization, the two of those have come together to create a really special moment for this technology where we realize that we need to deploy as many heat pumps as possible over the ensuing couple decades.
I was impressed enough with the technology, and we installed some Mitsubishi heat pumps here in our house, some cold climate heat pumps, and I was impressed enough with the technology that we decided not to keep the gas lines running at all. To your earlier point, like we said no, we're going to go completely electric, but we decided not even to put in electric resistance heat. Because we felt like the cold climate heat pumps were going to be strong enough to be able to handle just about anything that we have. And I'm certain that there are probably some customers out there who will make some sort of trade-off around that. But at least from our perspective, we felt comfortable enough with how the technology has evolved to be able to make that decision.
Yeah, well, look, Paul, I think that's a really good point, and it all comes down to how much heating and cooling does your house need,
Mhm.
and can that heat pump provide that amount of heating and cooling without any sort of backup, whether it be gas or electric. We've developed some proprietary algorithms here at Elephant Energy because we felt like the existing methodologies out there they were a little too conservative. They were resulting in systems that were oversized, that required too much gas or electric backup. And instead, we've built a proprietary technology in-house that lets us size heat pumps more accurately than other ways of doing so. And that more accurate heating load calculation actually lets us reduce the amount of backup, quote unquote, that a home needs. So we can comfortably and confidently fully electrify a home like yours without that electric resistance backup or that gas backup. And we've seen that play out, right? It all depends on building science. You've got to size the heat pump accurately for the home. And then there's a layer of customer preference. What happens when it's -10 out? How well is the heat pump going to perform? How quickly can it get up to temperature? These are all parts of the conversation that we like to have with homeowners to figure out what is going to be the optimal solution for their home, starting with the building science and coupling that with what is your preference and what is your comfort, desires and demands for your home.
Homeowners made the decision to go with heat pumps. They've connected with Elephant and had some preliminary modeling done and some discussions with you. Jan, I was going to ask you, what happens next? What's the process as we start to get involved with what is needed to actually go from, hey, I want a heat pump, to, oh yes, I'm actually using a heat pump?
Yeah, so that's definitely where I come in. So as a project manager, we're really running the project from beginning to end. And I think part of the Elephant sweet sauce is we're a single point of contact for the customer. So customer only really has to engage with us for scheduling everything from, walkthroughs, installations, their various trades. So that could be plumbers, HVAC, electrical, energy efficiency, potentially. We're really coordinating all of that just to make it a one-stop shop for the customer. In addition, any follow-up from the project we're carrying out as well. So making sure the customer knows how to operate their system efficiently. We do monitoring of any ducted installations we're doing for 2 years and then into the future as well, just making sure all the systems are running as expected, putting out temperatures as expected. And then, long term, making sure the customer is, happy and understands how to maintain their system or works with us on a maintenance plan.
For me, Jan, I was really impressed by not only Elephant's ability to really bring together the installation contractors, the sizing of the equipment, etc., but y'all walked me through how to finance this thing as well. And I was hoping I could spend a little bit of time talking about that, if that's okay, because heat pumps are such a critical part of climate activity. There are incentives baked into the IRA. As I mentioned, there are actually incentives here in Massachusetts through our Mass Save program and various other places. Why has it been so difficult and so spotty, if you will, around the different types of incentives that have been put out there in order to encourage people to shift to heat pumps?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, there's been quite a variety of incentives out there, and I think navigating all of that is really the challenge. Does the system I want installed or, my contractor is recommending, does it qualify for the local incentives, whether that's Mass Save or other utilities in your region? Does it qualify for any state credits or state incentives? Does it qualify for Inflation Reduction Act tax credits or the rebates that are coming down, hopefully sometime this calendar year? That's all something that Elephant does in-house. So you really don't have to worry about any of that. And we're taking the rebate up front, so you also have that much less out-of-pocket money for the project. And then the financing component, it's really interesting. I think in Colorado, maybe around 20% of our customers finance, just because it's more of a market rate. But here in Massachusetts, 80 to 90% of our customers are using the heat loan financing. And it makes a lot of sense. It's 0% 7-year term. So it can be a really financially attractive tool. That being said, but there's a lot of requirements that come with all that. So we're trying to help customers manage and navigate it. And the financing is really, kind of a loan for the customer. But even still, there are technical requirements that MassSave is looking for when approving that loan. And then banks are working with customers directly to make sure that they get credit approval and things like that. As to like why I think it's so scattered. I think there really just hasn't been one sort of source of truth for how to do this correctly in a way. And I think everyone's kind of picked and chosen a different way. I mean, not long ago, NEP, the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership, was the go-to location to check heat pump performance for cold climate, and a lot of utilities were utilizing that database. Since then, that's kind of changed. So January 1st of this year, for example, 2024, MassSave has shifted to using Energy Star 6.1 cold climate. And, that change hasn't come with some heartburn for both customers and contractors. So while everyone's always trying to do, I think, the right thing from a policy perspective, making it easy for customers and contractors has certainly been a challenge and a hurdle, and one that I think, we're trying to navigate and make it sort of seamless to our customers.
So just to take a step up from that, I think that's a really succinct description of the problem, Jan. And the way that I would frame it is part of our business model, right, is to work closely with homeowners to help them upgrade their homes to be more climate friendly. And we do that with a network of vetted subcontractors. And our insight has been that most HVAC contractors are actually really quite good at their job. But all those technical details that Jan just mentioned, keeping track of which equipment qualifies for which rebate programs, what are the variables, it's pretty technical. With cars, you sort of have just one key variable. What's the miles per gallon of a given car? And if you had rebates that were driven based off miles per gallon, that would be pretty simple. But now what you have in the rebate world is at least 4, if not more, different highly technical parameters that are required. A heat pump has to meet all of those parameters to be able to qualify for those rebates. And there's a complex set of paperwork that contractors have to fill out to qualify equipment for those rebates. So what we found is that we can partner with those installers. We can take all that paperwork off of installers' hands and manage that ourselves, because it's complex, but it's not complicated. And it is something that installers are they're really good at installing stuff. They're not necessarily great at building a database to figure out which equipment's going to qualify for which rebate. And you layer that onto the fact that there's multiple rebates. So in Massachusetts, there's the MassSave rebates. There's also a federal tax credit. In Colorado, there's city rebates, there's county rebates, there's utility rebates, there's state tax credits, there's federal tax credits. And then, as Jan mentioned, across the entire country, there's about to be IRA rebates. And each one of those programs might have different rules for what qualifies and what equipment does not. So it's really complicated. It in some ways, it's more complicated than it needs to be. But the value of Elephant for a lot of contractors and customers has been the fact that we can sort of sit in the middle and streamline the entire process for both parties around the rebates and other financial incentives out there.
Do you think that part of this complexity is due to the relatively immature market around heat pumps and the fact that we're still trying to figure this out as an economy? Or do you think that this, maybe a better question is, do you think that this is going to work its way through to become more simplified as we mature as a market?
That's such a good question. I mean, it's always tempting to compare something like the heat pump market to something like solar, where you can get kind of a solar quote easily. They all are kind of similar. But if you go to 10 different contractors to get a quote for your heat pump, or even like a furnace and AC system, you are going to get very different quotes. They all are potentially have relationships with different manufacturers, different distributors. So depending on what depending on what equipment they buy, they might recommend different things for your home. And you have to kind of navigate that too to determine which one's right. Some might be cheaper, but they might come with a much lower warranty. Some might be more expensive, but they might come with a higher warranty. hopefully the contracts have done their due diligence and all qualify for the highest level of rebate, and they have the customer's best interest in mind. But you know, that's not always the case. And as far as this getting simpler or more difficult, it's it'll be really interesting, I think, to see what impact the Inflation Reduction Act has. Those that those are going to come with those rebates, which are up to $8,000 for households with an AMI below 80%.
Could you explain that a little bit more? In AMI below 80%?
Yeah, sorry, that's average median income. So if you're an income qualified family or household with through the Inflation Reduction Act, you can get up to $8,000 in rebates for your heat pump installation. And there are also rebates for other technologies as well that you can pair with that. So it's a pretty significant financial instrument that's obviously, if you're qualified, you'll want to utilize. And I think those sort of dollar amounts can really drive the market in terms of what system performance will be utilized. That being said, it's not clear to me that that's going to make things easier. Mass Save, for example, will continue to have their requirements irrespective of what comes out of DC for the Inflation Reduction Act specifics. A utility like Xcel Energy, which we work with a lot in Colorado, might have different interests. For example, while they are interested in decarbonizing the heating sector, they're also very interested in making sure that their summer peak load remains low. And for that reason, that might change the kind of equipment that they really want to see and really want to incentivize in their region. And so now imagine that across 50 states. So, you're going to see a bigger focus on cooling efficiency in the southwestern climates. You're going to see a bigger focus on dehumidification in the southeastern climates. Same with the differences between northeastern and northwestern climates. So I'm not sure I see sort of a heat pump singularity that we're approaching necessarily. I think it might continue to remain complex for some time.
So I think what we've done is we've really laid out the complexity to the process. We've laid out the challenges. We've laid out the technical and financing challenges for this. As a homeowner starts to walk down this path, and starts to consider heat pumps. I mean, heat pumps are kind of a funky little equipment decision as well, right? DR, you mentioned that your furnace was on its last legs. I mentioned that our AC condenser had decided to not participate anymore. Oftentimes these decisions are being made because an existing piece of equipment has decided to just keel over and die. What's being done, or what would you suggest to homeowners as they're thinking about heat pumps? Do they need to get the full life out of their existing equipment, or is there an economic benefit and value to switching over today?
So our perspective at Elephant Energy is that customers have to make the right decision for their homes, and we're going to do everything we can to educate them on the various trade-offs. Because there's no one clear answer. It depends a lot on your home, your budget, your goals, your preferences. Unfortunately, the state of the industry is such that if you have to replace a gas boiler, a gas furnace, an AC, you can do that very quickly. There's a lot of existing inventory out there. There's a lot of existing know-how with the installer community. There's very few financial rebates and therefore hoops that you have to jump through to get something installed. The challenge is the heat pump industry is not quite there. Inventory is a little harder to come by. There's actual work that's required to size and scope and design a system perfectly for your home. The rebates are complicated and often require a lot of paperwork and work done ahead of time to qualify for the rebates. And as a result, all that takes time. So if your gas furnace or gas water heater fails on you, it's going to be pretty hard. It's going to be a number of years until we can do a same-day replacement. We're working towards that as an industry. We're just not there yet. So instead, what we recommend most homeowners do is be educated. Figure out what your home needs. Figure out what your plan is going to be. Figure out what your let's call it pain tolerances for losing AC. If you lose AC, are you comfortable losing it for a day? Are you comfortable losing it for a week, a month, an entire cooling season? And use that to help you determine what is the right thing to do. If you're only going to be comfortable replacing or losing AC for one day, it might be worth proactively replacing that, because if you want to upgrade to a climate-friendly home, and you want to take advantage of these rebates, and you want to reduce your utility bills, improve your home comfort, and you want to get a heat pump, you should plan ahead and make sure that you can proactively replace that before it dies. If you're okay waiting a week, if you're okay waiting a month, maybe it's okay to not do that research ahead of time, right? You mentioned that your AC died, and that was the motivating factor for you to go figure out, okay, how do I actually get a heat pump for your home? It's a little bit of a different question if your furnace were to die. You don't want to run the risk of burst pipes in the winter, or other family members suffering through 45 degrees indoors. That would be an unfortunate outcome, I imagine, for you, Paul.
You've met my wife then. Yes.
Yeah. Didn't want to come to any conclusions there, but it all depends on what your own personal preferences are. I knew my furnace was on its last legs, and so I wanted to proactively replace it because I didn't want to be caught in that situation where I had to wait. I didn't want it to go out Christmas Eve when my in-laws were in town and wait 2 weeks to replace that furnace with a heat pump. I wanted to be able to do it proactively. I have a gas water heater. My gas water heater is 6 years old. It's not quite ready to be replaced. It has another couple of years of life left. Sure, I could replace it proactively with a heat pump today. I could lower my utility bills immediately by proactively replacing it. But the payback isn't perfect, and the carbon emissions piece of it is a very large motivating factor for me as the founder of a climate tech company. But it's not quite worth the urgency of replacing it immediately. So, look, what we're trying to do is meet homeowners where they're at, figure out where what is their tolerance and what are their goals for replacing systems at end of life, and then make sure you have a plan and that you've thought through the budget and the timing considerations on your own end.
Yeah. For us, there was another consideration as well. It's the fact that if we installed another AC unit, or if we had to replace our furnace or something like that, these are pieces of equipment that are going to last for another 15 years. And we weren't going to get another shot at actually putting a heat pump in if we didn't do something today. Right. So our tolerance was affected and considered that in terms of, hey, we want to do something, but we want to do something before the kids are off to college type thing.
That's right, Paul. It's a good point. If your furnace dies and you replace it with a gas furnace, you're locked into those carbon emissions for another 15 plus years. And anything we can do to get out ahead of that problem, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah. So as we kind of come to the tail end of this interview, what are some of the insights and things that you want homeowners to consider as they start thinking about heat pumps and start thinking about engaging in this process?
Just based on what DR said, don't wait until it's an emergency, especially a heating emergency. That's when, you're forced to make some less than ideal decisions and potentially commit emissions for another 15, 20 years for that equipment you're buying. And I think in general, if without urgency, you're able to really sort of consider what's right for your home and what are your goals? Are they comfort? Are they climate emissions? Are they operating costs? And find a solution that works there. I think, work beyond that, working with an expert to also figure out, one of the things we do with customers is consider some future proofing. An example is, we often are able to use a 100 amp panel to install a heat pump, even a heat pump water heater. But once a customer, maybe has a larger home and they're looking at electric stoves and they're looking at an EV charger in their future, that's when it makes sense to sort of flag that as part of the broader project. And again, that's something that Elephant can all roll into one project or do it in phases based on the comfort, the customer's kind of needs and wants. And there's also some economies of scale that we can utilize to having the electrician on site to do all that work essentially in the background. and just limit cost impacts by spreading it out over 3 or 4 different visits, say. And I think we actually have a good example of a customer who we did a heat pump. About 4 or 5 weeks later, their water heater failed. They called us. We came and did the water heater. And then 2 weeks later, they reached out again to say, "Hey, we actually would like to go, fully electric. We want your help with getting our gas stove out of the kitchen. We want your help with a little baseboard heater, and that would, all that is triggering a panel upgrade." And you were like, "Yeah, happy to do it." Definitely would have been nice to do all at once, but that is life. And I think that's probably the biggest determinant of project scope and complexity is should electrical get complicated.
Yeah, I like that point about just understanding where you're at in your journey around decarbonization, and to your point, making certain that things are being sized properly for not only today but also where you want to go in the future, which Jan, you and I chatted about and discussed, and certainly you guys did a great job in terms of getting us to the point where we have a little bit of runway now as we fully electrify as well. VR, I'll give you the last word. What do you want to ensure that the audience takes away from this conversation?
Look, at the end of the day, if you care about climate change, there's a very short list of decisions that you make as a homeowner that have a very large impact on carbon emissions. And then there's a whole lot of very small decisions. The very big decisions, how you heat and cool your home, how you heat the water in your home, the car that you choose to drive. These are things that really move the needle from a carbon emission standpoint. So if you care about climate change and you want to be making a difference, do an audit, figure out what are these assets in your home? How old are they? What do you want to replace them with? Exactly as Jan said, figure out that plan, the budget, etc. for your home. The good news is between all the financial incentives and the improvements in the technology, it's often cost neutral or even lower cost to replace these gas appliances with heat pump technology, and it often reduces your utility bill, and it often improves the comfort in your home. So it's a set of wins, win-win-wins for you as a homeowner. But you have to be prepared because of the early stage nature of this industry. So
DR, Jan from Elephant Energy, thank you for joining us on an 8 Minutes podcast. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I appreciate everything that you're doing around getting heat pumps and this market growing and scaling.
Thank you, Paul. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Paul. Super fun.